Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell Media Watch update. Today's edition is called the Alexander the Pfeffel era. And it's been quite a while. A lot has changed since then, since our last post. We now have a new Prime Minister. And I want to just reflect on the fact that Alan Moore, around a year ago to this month, reminded us that Boris Johnson, the occupant of number 10, replied "get stuff" when queried about his cuts to the fire services. And that's the calibre of politician that we're now having to deal with when it comes to the safety of people in their homes. But what's happened prior to his entering number 10 Downing Street? Well, the government's announced that it spent some £32 million to invest in Kinston and Chelsea College, and this is to provide high quality education to the community in the area. And this is actually good news. The college has been saved, and massive amount of support must be given to the campaigners who fought for that. But we've also got to acknowledge, before we start cheering the government, that actually it shouldn't take a tragedy of this nature for it to do the right thing. I mean, it's just as important to remember that the council had actually okayed the sale of the site for development of luxury houses. Now the council in the area is actually committed to spending some £60 million in refurbishment to the Lancaster West estate, and that's the neighbourhood where Grenfell reside. The £60 million is said to provide opportunities for employment and apprentice schemes, which is a good development again. So if we put this in context, around 10 years ago, 6 people lost their lives, 20 people were injured in a Lacanau house fire, 2 firefighters were killed in a blaze in Southampton. Now there was a coroner's report which issued a Rule 43 report, and this is supposed to signify this is a never again moment. Go and check it on Google. And essentially the government's supposed to listen to those recommendations and put them in place. Now one of the recommendations that came from that report was that fire sprinklers should be used in high-rise buildings to make sure that firefighters, in this case, wouldn't lose their lives. And when Theresa May was actually challenged while she was Prime Minister in the Chambers, she actually had the audacity to actually come out with a comment that actually the Rule 43 report was signifying that fire sprinklers should be considered. It didn't say that they should be used. Now it's been just over a month since the last Grenfell Media Watch report, and in that short space of time a lot's happened. Kinston and Chelsea Council have actually been going backwards. You see, they had a Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee. Now, what the council has done is actually scrap that committee. They voted to get rid of it. Now, they say they're going to replace it with submerge it into this wider public body where they'll give it a special focus. And I'm of the belief that actually the Grenfell Scrutiny Panel needs to actually be running and continue running until the inquiry has done its job, until the police investigation has done its job. To shut it off now, before there's been any really meaningful progress, is actually a clear step of going backwards. I think Joe Delaney eloquently states it when he says that the council seem to be looking at Grenfell like a PR exercise, while the community, the residents, recognise it as a humanitarian issue. Now, scrutiny is important for many reasons. And of course, Theresa May's famous words about rehousing all the families has come back to be part of her legacy. Of those 200 plus families or households that were affected, some 11 are now living in temporary accommodation, 1 in a hotel. It's a vast improvement. But if you think it's taken over 2 years to actually get to that state, that's awful. Now, do you remember Professor Steck? She's the independent researcher who actually found high levels of toxicity in the air, in the land, the soil around Grenfell, affecting the community. You know, she's resigned from a panel after the government's group that they've employed, AECOM I think they're called, has actually said that, well, actually we've done our research around Grenfell and the levels of toxicity is, you know, it's okay compared to other similar urban environments. Now she doesn't want to be part of that, so she stepped down. But even ministers who are actually part of a scrutiny panel on this topic have said that the government's not doing enough, that they're ignoring what has been called the Grenfell cough. And why is this taking so long to resolve? Now, many of you probably know by now that the case against Arconic in the US has been dismissed without prejudice by a US judge who reckons that the case against Arconic misleading its investors about the unsafe uses of the cladding hasn't actually been made. Bearing in mind that the cladding in Grenfell has once again failed tests, this time proving that it wasn't up to its marketed level of safety. Now, the other firm in the lawsuit, the one that owns Celotex, is actually now being exposed to actually having the audacity to claim that many of the people who passed away in Grenfell may have done so because of pre-existing medical conditions. And this is just blatantly outrageous, as well as morally repugnant. Okay, so what else has taken place? Well, Danny Cotton, the London Fire Brigade chief, you may have heard, is retiring after 3 hours in the post. It's a common tactic we hear, especially after deaths in custody or deaths where the state has a role in actually protecting the safety of those who have lost their lives. Now, Cotton is actually saying that, this is not a cop-out. She's not trying to avoid responsibility. In fact, she's made some useful comments saying that the government response is just not enough. But as useful as those comments have been, we can't forget, and many people have challenged her comments about the space shuttle on the Shard during the inquiry, which was seen by many as not only insensitive, but grossly disrespectful. Now, in May, there were still some 323 high-rise buildings across England that were still surrounded in that flammable cladding. Thousands and thousands, that's tens of thousands of people's lives still at risk. Comments like "never again" are now sounding like empty platitudes. Something has to be done. I mean, only just recently, another 11-storey tower block has been found with the exact same cladding as Grenfell. Now, the building's managers are compiling an application to the government for funding to remove the cladding. But you've really got to think, what were the decision-making processes that led to that cladding being chosen? Were they the same as similar to that was used by the TMO in Kinston? One that placed the profit before people?
Oh, the light one.
These are all the kind of things that we have to question. I mean, right now, we're still waiting for justice. And it doesn't seem like it's coming anytime soon. I mean, there was supposed to be an interim report. We're now being told that's going to be published sometime in October. There's no date for phase 2 of the inquiry. We're just being told sometime in 2020, hopefully not December 2020. Funny enough, I was looking at the original terms of reference again, and there's no mention of the word justice in it. No mention of finding the people who are responsible and holding them to account. A few months ago, I attended a community meeting to find out where the police were going on with their investigation. I've not heard anything about a follow-up. Is the investigation dead? It's really interesting because now we know all about Paul Bassetti. We've heard lots about his defence team talking about how it wasn't grossly offensive to share this footage of the Grenfell Tower burning in an effigy on a bonfire between 20 to 30 of his mates who were drinking through WhatsApp. I mean, we also know now that Paul Bassetti is a straight-out racist. We've seen some of the comments that he's made in the past. But that's not the justice that we're talking about. I mean, it's not even a foregone conclusion that he's going to be found guilty of violating or misuse of Communications Act. And in the meantime, the perpetrators of the real tragedy are still at large, or retiring, or stepping down and setting up consultancy firms, or leaving the country, or hiding their money in nest eggs. Thankfully, support is still coming from many directions. Now, the Late Show host, James Corden, used his platform to tell people to keep talking about Grenfell. And his was an important intervention. We're seeing the Grenfell community remembered in exhibitions like Never Forget, which humanises and documents what's taking place. Keep talking about Grenfell. And talk is important, because let me give you an example, things that we don't know. The talking therapies at the Oromi Centre, and this is a mental health centre that gives culturally sensitive treatment, not only to young people, but to elders, those who are raised on this stiff upper lip nonsense, who don't want to talk about the issues unless it's from someone who actually gets them, who understands them. I mean, I'm not saying that NHS don't have some fantastic services. They do. But we need spaces like the Irene Centre. And when the funding is pulled from them, wow, heavens have opened up. When the funding's pulled from them, then people are left to suffer. Depression sets in, and results are often catastrophic. I mean, we've got to big up photographers like Feruza. Now, she's one of the bereaved, and she's running an exhibition, Golden Ashes I think it's called, and another fantastic project, donating charity to mental health organisations to support those who are suffering in silence. Now, I've been blessed to see some amazing work by the artists in North Kent. In particular, I'm thinking about those at the Port Vila Pavilion who I was honoured to actually sit down and reason with them while looking at some of the fantastic work they're doing, archiving this history and supporting the community, using art as therapy. It's amazing. This work has to continue. And we know that art is a great healer. If we think of the work done by the Grenfell Memorial Project and their green mosaic with the flowers, amazing work. But one of the reasons I'm talking about this is because while I focus often on the political aspects of Grenfell, we have to also consider the health aspects and look at it from a holistic position. Justice delayed is justice denied. And I'm thinking about the tragic story of the Grenfell commander Amanda Beckles. Now, she committed suicide and lost her life recently, and she left a note explaining how she had PTSD. She could not cope with the aftermath of what happened on that night. She only lived meters away from Grenfell. In her final message, she made the comment that Grenfell tragedy had affected her badly. We need justice. Something has to change. Now, I'm going to apologise because our last report, I made a mistake. I forgot to include the voice of the community inside it. And we've uploaded and created a new version which you can download, which has some of the voices of people who were on the ground affected and how they felt. And that was an important part of justice. And I should have spotted that. So please download it, read it, share it, and understand how this affects people on so many different levels. Anyway, I'm sorry it's been so long. Still got a lot of work to do. So you see I'm getting drenched and I'm standing under a tree. I haven't got an umbrella. Foolish enough, think for one moment that it wouldn't rain. So I'm going to close as usual and say may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Asher.